Kia ora. Let me just make sure this is all working. How do I make me big? Here we go. Oh, no, that broke it. Oh, there we go. There we go. Let me know in the comments below whether you can hear me. Hopefully that is working fine. I believe it is. Cool. Kia ora everyone. Thanks for jumping on. I'm Brady Dyer, one of your Hutt City councillors, and tonight I want to do something a little bit different. I want to walk you through this whole amalgamation thing from the very start in plain English, no jargon, and then answer your questions properly at the end. So why tonight? Because Wednesday this week our council votes on whether Hutt City Council submits something called a Head Start proposal to the government. Basically, we put up our hand to be part of a plan to merge our regions councils into one. It's a big call, and I want you to understand it properly before any of this happens, not just to see the headlines about it afterwards. I'll say this up front, and I'll say it again later on. I have not made my mind up on this. I've got real questions I still can't answer to my own satisfaction. So tonight isn't me trying to convince you of anything. It's me trying to explain it clearly, tell you honestly where I'm stuck, and then hear what you think. So stick around for questions at the end, or drop them in the comments as we go. I can't see any comments to say this is working audio-wise, but I've seen a thumbs up from someone, so I assume it is working until someone tells me otherwise. I'll just keep going. So let's dive into it about what actual amalgamation actually means. So firstly, what are we even talking about? Well, right now our region, the Wellington region, is run by 9 different councils. There's 8 city and district councils: Wellington, Hutt City, Upper Hutt, Porirua, Kapiti, and the 3 Wairarapa districts. And then there's the Greater Wellington Regional Council on top of all of them, which handles region-wide stuff like public transport, flood protection, restoring waterways. 9 councils covering roughly the same patch of land. Covers about 550,000 people in the lower North Island. So what's being talked about is collapsing that down into one. Instead of 9 separate councils, you'd have a single council called a unitary authority running the whole region. Underneath that, there'd be smaller local bodies called community councils, which I'll explain properly in a bit, which would be handling the local on-the-ground stuff. So when people say amalgamation in this context, that's what they mean. Not 2 councils joining up, but potentially the whole region, all 9 councils becoming one. That's the basic shape. Doesn't mean it's decided, doesn't mean it's simple, but that's the picture you need to get your head around for the rest of this conversation to make sense. So how did we get here? Well, back in November 2025, the government announced a plan called Simplifying Local Government. And I'll be honest, the first version of this was pretty full on. It proposed scrapping our elected regional council partway through the term and replacing that with a board called a Combined Territories Board, which was basically made up of the region's mayors instead. That went out for public consultation, but actually before that, Hutt City Council and Porirua had already asked our own residents about this. Back in 2025, we ran a vote, a referendum, asking should Hutt City Council, and I'll read this exactly word for word, should Hutt City Council explore amalgamation options with Wellington, Upper Hutt, Porirua City Councils and the Greater Wellington Regional Council, which combined relevant services and functions while keeping appropriate services and decisions making local. Quite a mouthful. So that vote came in favour. About 55% of people said yes to having that conversation. So this conversation didn't start with the government. It started with us already asking our own community. While the government's consultation on that first plan was still running in December last year, the mayors from across our region got together and agreed to start shaping a regional approach of our own, rather than waiting to see what came out the other end. That consultation closed in February with over 1,000 submissions. The feedback was pretty clear. People were broadly open to change happening, but they didn't like the specific idea that replacing our elected regional councillors partway through their term One other thing to note, some councils didn't like the government's initial time frame for amalgamation. Over 4 years they were proposing then. Some regions had been talking about amalgamation with their communities for decades, and they were ready to move a bit quicker. Then on the 5th of May this year, the government came back with a revised plan. This time they created 2 pathways. One's called Head Start, a voluntary option where regions can put forward their own proposal now, and the other is called the Backstop, a compulsory process the government will run itself later for any region that doesn't do the Head Start path, or if they put in a Head Start proposal and the government doesn't approve it, they would also go down the Backstop route. So that Backstop is in substance the same idea from that first plan, just delayed and only kicking in when a region hasn't done its own. And I'll come back to the Backstop a bit later on because it matters a lot to how people are thinking about all of this. I'll just check and see if there's any questions coming through. Yep, there is. Lovely. So why the region chose to work together rather than sort of each figuring out our own answers separately. And the thinking kind of goes like this. Change is coming one way or another. The government has been really clear about that. So instead of 9 councils, each responding on their own, the mayors from across the region plus the Greater Wellington Regional Council agreed to work together through a group called the Mayoral Forum, with officials from each council feeding into it to put together one shared draft proposal for what our region's future could look like. That's what people mean when they talk about us holding the pen. If reform's coming either way, the logic is better for the people who actually know this region to write the plan than have someone else write it for us later. But here's the bit I really want to be clear on. That regional group has now finished drafting a proposal, but that doesn't mean it's actually going anywhere yet. Each individual council this week still has to decide on its own whether to actually put its name to that proposal and submit it. And that's exactly what Hutt City Council is voting on Wednesday, and all the other councils from the Wellington region are voting on their proposal, the same proposal, this coming week too. So worth noting that the way the government has actually structured the Head Start process is that a council can vote this week to not put forward a Head Start proposal, which we've seen in the media lately Upper Hutt is likely to do. They haven't made that decision yet. Their vote is on the same day as us. But if a region like Upper Hutt decides they don't want to go ahead, as long as the majority of councils or the population they represent do approve the Head Start proposal, that council that voted no can be dragged into the proposal. Yeah. So what's actually being decided on the 5th of August? 5th of August? Yeah, Wednesday, 5th of August. How's it August already? We're not voting on whether to amalgamate, and I want to make that really clear about that. That's not what we're voting on. What we're voting on is much, much narrower, whether to submit an outline to the government by the 9th of August saying, here's the model our region would prefer if reform happens. It still has to go through a proper design process, and Parliament would have to pass a law to actually make any of this happen. But here's something that sits pretty uneasy with me. The government gave us just 3 months for a decision this size, and that short window has real consequences. It's meant our own community engagement has had to happen very fast, just a couple of weeks on surveys, a couple of events, rather than the kind of proper sustained conversation a decision like this probably deserves. It's also meant something else, which I think matters just as much. It's limited how many sort of different options we've actually been able to explore properly together as a community. The experts did compare a few different setups behind the scenes, one massive big council for the whole region versus splitting that into 2 or 3, so maybe the Wairarapa being separate or Kapiti being separate. But the public was never actually asked to weigh in on those different options and compare them for ourselves. And that's a genuine question I kind of keep coming back to. How do you know you've picked the best option if we and our communities never really got to properly look at all of them side by side first? So what does the actual proposal look like? What's actually in the papers? I'll share in the comments later, or if any of my colleagues, elected colleagues from around the region are watching the video and they've got the link to our proposal handy, chuck it in the comments below. So our proposal is public on their website now. It's a public meeting on Wednesday. Anyone's welcome to tune in on YouTube and watch it, or more than welcome to come along and join us in the council's chambers too. So the actual model that's being proposed is one single council for the whole region. That's that unitary authority I mentioned, replacing all 9 of our current councils. Underneath that layer, there'd be at least 5 community councils based roughly on natural catchment areas. So think the Hutt Valley could potentially be one community council, Wellington City, Porirua up to the north, and then Kapiti could be separate, and then the Wairarapas could be one combined community council. At the very top, you'd have an elected mayor for the whole region, plus a bunch of elected councillors, plus the elected chair of each community council, all sitting together on the governing board. And to stop one of the big population centres simply outvoting everyone else at that table, there is a proposed rule that certain key decisions would need a supermajority to pass, somewhere around 2/3, though the exact number is still being worked through, rather than just getting through on a simple majority. So if this goes ahead, none of this happens overnight. The earliest it would actually start is at the next local elections in 2028. So I'll talk a bit more about these community councils and what they actually are. Think of it as sort of a smaller local layer sitting underneath the big regional council. It would still have its own elected members and its own chair. The idea is that the local everyday decisions, the stuff that really only affects your own area, would get made by people close to that area, not by someone across the region who's never been there. Exactly how much power and money these community councils end up with is still being decided. But that's one of the things that would get locked down on in this next detailed design stage if that happened. So let's talk about who'd actually represent you under this model. You'd have one mayor for the whole region elected by everyone. All 550,000 population would vote for one mayor. Then somewhere between 16 and 24 councillors elected from wards across the region. On top of that, you'd have the elected chairs from each community council that would also sit on that regional table, so they have a dual role of representing your local community on the unitary council, but they would also chair that local community council board. All up, that's somewhere about 22 to 30 people representing the whole region. For context, that's similar size to Auckland's council, which is the closest comparison we've got here in New Zealand. There'd also be dedicated Māori wards, both at the regional level and the community council level. And that's something that's, like I say, going to be worked through in the detailed design that would happen if the Head Start proposal, 1, was signed off by each council, 2, the government approved it. It would then go into the detailed design phase. So what about the actual services that you rely on day to day? There's actually a real piece of reasoning behind this gets split up. The Independent Financial Report looked at research from around the country and found something that makes sense once you think about it. The big infrastructure, heavy stuff, things like public transport, roading, water infrastructure, tends to run more efficiently at a bigger scale, pretty much no matter how councils are structured. But the more local people stuff, parks, libraries, pools, community services, doesn't really get cheaper or better by being run by a bigger organisation. If anything, it actually risks getting worse because the decisions end up being made further away from the people actually using those services. That's basically the logic behind the split in this proposal. The big regional stuff, public transport, regional planning, flood protection, keeps running at that regional scale, folded into that new bigger council, likely still through its own dedicated organisation, a bit like how public transport works today. Interestingly, some environmental and freshwater work that the Greater Wellington currently does could actually shift down to the community council level instead, because those community councils are drawn along the natural catchments of our rivers and streams, which is exactly the kind of scale that you'd want for that work. So while we're talking about pushing some things up, there's also the opportunity to bring some things down that are currently done at a regional level down to that community council level. If we had more time as well, I'd quite like to have explored if there's anything that's being done nationally now that could drop down into the community council or unitary level. Things like social housing, for example. Hutt City Council, Porirua City Council, and Wellington City Council all provide community housing. Obviously, we've also got the government's Kāinga Ora, also doing social housing. wouldn't it be great if we had time to explore the idea of maybe one entity looking after social housing for the whole Wellington region, with the funding from the government and the property that the government currently owns through Kāinga Order? Just one example of something that I'd thought it would have been great to explore, the idea of our local government actually doing more local stuff. And there's examples across the world, Japan being one that I know quite well, where actually the local government delivers so much more than our local government does here. Not saying it would work best at our level, following their suit, but like for them, police, fire, ambulances, schools, hospitals, health, everything is managed at the local government level. So local everyday stuff, the libraries, the pools, the parks, the rubbish collection, that would still sit with that community council level. I can already see some questions coming in on the next topic, which is the money side of things. That's what people always want to know. The great thing is we've had an independent report done to model all the costs and the savings of doing the amalgamation. And I'll keep this next bit pretty high level because the full report with all the detailed tables and methodology is publicly available on our website. I'm hoping someone's put it in the chat. If not, I'll do it afterwards. If you want to get into the actual numbers yourself, that's the best place to go. But roughly setting up one big regional council is estimated to cost somewhere in the vicinity of $250 million upfront. $250 million. I'll say that again. It's a lot of money upfront that we would need to find in a rates capped world with households already struggling with bills. It's a lot of money that we're going to have to find to go down this path if that's what's decided. Against that, the modelling suggests that there would be hundreds of millions of dollars of savings over time, but that's spread across a 25-year period. So not exactly a quick payback. The payback period was sitting around 7 to 10 years. Thanks, Peter, for sharing that link. I'll see if I can pop it up there. Yeah, that's the link to our council agenda on Wednesday, which has the things I'm talking about. So yeah, the payback period's quite a long time. And on rates specifically, there isn't any sort of clear confirmed numbers yet for what this actually means for your individual rates bill for Lower Hutt residents. And that's one of the real gaps for me. The financial analysis does look at the regional rates on average across the whole region and makes the argument there for amalgamation. But for me, as a Hutt City Councillor, I would love to see the detail on what this would actually mean for our residents. And I'll say it one more time, say one more thing on the finance side, because I think it's genuinely important. Right now, on our own, Hutt City Council doesn't have a lot of financial buffer if something goes badly wrong. If we had a natural disaster or a major unexpected cost pop up, being part of a much bigger combined council would spread that risk across a much bigger base. So a shock that could really hurt us alone would be buffered if we were part of a much bigger organisation. That's a genuine, real benefit of scale, so I don't want to pretend otherwise. So real costs up front, big real costs up front, possible projected savings down the track, but genuine uncertain rates impact over a very long time frame. That's the honest sort of high level picture. Like I say, if you want to get into the details of the finances, that report's on our website in the link that Peter has so kindly shared there. So where to from here? Well, if Hutt City Council and enough of the other councils do agree to submit a Head Start proposal, here's sort of the next steps of what would happen. The government would have 3 weeks to decide which regional proposals from across the country it would proceed with. That's ahead of their general election in November. If ours does get picked up, then there's a further detailed design phase that would run from about October through to March next year. And that's where all the real detailed stuff would get thrashed out. Things like the actual representation numbers, the funding, how much power those community councils would have. Would it be able to set its own rates? How much funding it would get from its big brother? How services would actually get transferred around. All of that would get worked out properly over that 6-month period. And then final decisions from Cabinet are expected around May next year on which ones they are then moving forward again. And then there'd be actual law changes, actual legislation drafted that would need to happen before sort of mid-2028 for the 2028 local elections in October, which is the earliest point any of this would actually start. Importantly, right up until then, until any of this happens, our current councils and your current councillors keep doing their job exactly as we do now. So what happens if our region doesn't do this? What if we don't enter a Head Start proposal on Wednesday? Well, the government has said clearly that if a region doesn't put forward its own plan, it doesn't mean nothing happens. It means the government's own compulsory backstop process kicks in instead, sometime after the 2028 elections. And then, if I'm honest, if we do go down the backstop route, I don't believe the councils are going to stop working on amalgamation and put down the tools until 2028. We'd already decided as a region, the mayors had already decided that considering amalgamation was an important thing to do this term. That work will continue through till 2028. And by then, there would be some certainty from the government about what this backstop process actually means. There's also a general election in the middle of all that period as well, which may change the makeup of the current government. We could have a new government. There's quite a bit of uncertainty with there being a general election there in the middle of that. So here's the sort of honest problem. Nobody, including the government, has actually really spelled out exactly what that backstop process looks like in detail. So part of the argument for doing Head Start now is that it's better for the region to shape its own future than wait for an undefined process to be done to us later. But because the backstop genuinely isn't fully defined yet, that argument cuts both ways. It's hard to fully weigh up a choice against something nobody can properly describe. So I'll get into a few of the questions that I've still got, and I'm not going to have the answers tonight. These are, I'm just wanting to be real straight up with you about where I am, because I don't think I should stand here and pretend like I've got this all figured out 3 days out from the vote either. So firstly, nobody has actually costed up a standalone option for just the Hutt Valley on its own. It's come up in conversations between our mayors, but it was never formally modelled alongside the other options. So I can't tell you with confidence whether that would have been a better or worse for us specifically, because nobody's actually done that work to know. And I think when talking with people, as I've been doing over this last week, that's kind of where people have had some appetite for amalgamation, is between the Hutt Valleys. So I think it's a bit frustrating that we haven't actually costed that or worked out how it would be. The reason we haven't is the government's made it clear they want one unitary for the whole region, and they might entertain some smaller unitaries, but the government has set some pretty strict boundaries with what it will allow within the Head Start proposal. Secondly, I'm genuinely not sure the level of consultation that we've actually done matches how big this decision actually is. Like I say, we've done a couple of weeks of surveys, and some community events have happened. I've been running my own community events this week because I genuinely want to hear from more people to help shape my mind going into Wednesday's vote. But for a decision that could reshape how this entire region is governed, I think it's a pretty fair thing to be questioning. And finally, the one that I kind of keep coming back to, I'm not confident council actually gets another real substantive vote on the final detailed design before the government locks this in around 2027, 2028. As far as I can tell, Wednesday might genuinely be the only moment our council, as your elected representatives, gets to properly weigh in before this becomes close to irreversible. If that's true, I think that changes how much weight this Wednesday's vote should actually carry. It's not just a proposal, it might be the one real say we get. I don't have any neat answers to these, as I say. I think you need to deserve that. I just genuinely don't know. They're still open for me and not resolved. So I'm still on the fence. There's a real argument that doing nothing isn't actually an option, and that shaping our own future beats having an undefined process forced on us later. But I'm weighing that against a financial case that only really pays off in around a decade's time, against a real upfront $250 million cost at a time when rates are already under real pressure, and against a process that, if I'm honest, has moved far faster than I think a decision this size actually deserves. I'm not deciding this based on what's the easiest for me politically, and I'm not going in with my mind already made up. So which brings me to you guys. Council votes this Wednesday, and I genuinely want to hear from as many of you as possible. I want to hear what's important to you, hear what you're still struggling, think about what you might be missing. You can message me directly if you'd like. You can write in the comments now below. I can see lots of them rolling in, which I'll get to very shortly. Or you can catch up with me a few more of the drop-in sessions. I should really have prepared water. To my wife, Emma, if you're watching this, could you bring me a glass of water, please? Unfortunately, all I've got on my desk is a bottle of whiskey, and I think swigging out of that might not be the right look. So yeah, let's get into some of your questions, because that's the part I'm really looking forward to. If I can't answer your questions now, or if there are questions that aren't really focused on the topic of amalgamation, I will definitely answer them afterwards. I can see a lot of these are quite long. Oh god, there's heaps. Cool, I'm just bringing up the questions now. Oh, turns out my wife is my biggest fan. I'm just going to adjust my chair as well. All right, let's bring up these questions. I think in the interest of time, I won't put up... everyone can obviously see the questions. Some are on YouTube, some are on Facebook. But there's obviously plenty of comments like this of people sharing their thoughts. So definitely do that, not discouraging it, but I won't sort of address those as a question in the interest of time. So if it was up to me about amalgamation, what would you do? What does the evidence suggest? I guess this is my decision we've got to make on Wednesday. If there were no parameters, if there was no restrictions, if there was no time pressure from the government on all of this, I would want to have a real data-driven, evidence-based conversation that would take far longer than 3 months to address. We would look at previous examples of super cities in Auckland. We would look at all the information, and we would see what actually works best for each community within the Wellington region. My gut feeling is that we could work together a lot better across the region on a number of things. We've got Te Akiwai now delivering water. We could have a Wellington transport type model that did all of the roads and all the public transport. We could have a tourism sort of regional entity. The worry I face is that if we end up with a model in our head start that is fractional unitary, if there's two unitaries for the Wellington region, there's still going to have to be that regional layer delivering the regional stuff. Public transport, everyone would agree, has to be delivered regionally. A train that runs from Masterton through the 3 Wairarapa councils, through Upper Hutt, through Lower Hutt into Wellington, there's no way that a council could individually own its train tracks or its own trains along that line. That has to be delivered at that scale. So if we end up with 2 unitaries, say a Wairarapa one and a Wellington one, there's still going to have to be that even higher tier. The other thing I struggle with is that this whole proposal is called simplifying local government, and the proposal on the table actually proposes an additional vote on your voting paper. You're now voting for 4 positions instead of 3. Is that simplifying? Possibly not. But I guess that's the $1 million question, which is why you asked it. Karen, how can the Gov do this without going to the public first to ask if we want it? I mean, it's a fair question, and definitely put that to the government and the ministers involved. Just reading which ones are actually questions. There's heaps of really good comments in here, so definitely keep them coming in. Do you think the proposal would actually achieve the financial efficiencies that supporters describe? I mean, their own financial analysis actually says in the summary page, I think it is, that one of the things they've noticed while researching other amalgamations that have happened is that they always overcook the efficiencies and always undercook the setup costs up front. So we might possibly see the savings in 25 years. I probably won't be on the council then to let you know. And there's probably plenty of people in our city that might not even be around in 25 years. It's a very long time to maybe see some efficiencies. And the efficiencies they're talking about over that full 25 years is between $3,000 and $4,000 per house in total. So it's about $150 a year of benefit. If we were to amalgamate, like I say, that would be over 25 years. The bigger worry for me isn't so much those financial efficiencies, it's the huge $250 million setup fees up front to actually amalgamate in the first place. And the government's made it pretty clear that they're not going to provide any financial support, but they have made it very clear they're going to cap rates. That council will only be able to put up the rates by 4%, which wouldn't get anywhere close to touching the sides of how much money would be needed for amalgamation. So if there's no extra funding and rates can't go up to pay for it, we would literally have to find about $10 million of savings within our current budget, which is huge. What happens to staff in the councils now? Good question. Hasn't really been much talk about this. This would probably come through the detailed design. Like I say, nothing would be changing until 2028, and it's likely there would be a very big sort of transitional period as well, where some things would keep being delivered like locally by local groups until the big beast was really set up and running. So how it worked in Auckland is they said, look, no one's losing their job. We're all coming together, and then over time, as the city grows, we'll have that capacity within our numbers. Because you've got to remember that actually the process of amalgamation, while it's very, very expensive, you also need staff to be doing the actual physical amalgamation work, which can't be understated. I'll pop these up so I can read them at the same time. What impact would this have on our community facilities? I don't expect a place like Upper Hutt being comfortable with funding all of our libraries and pools, for example. Good question. There is the possibility that those community councils could sort of ring fence rates or set their own rates. So I've always been really clear that if people want to have a level of service and they're happy to pay for it, then that's great. But like you say, Upper Hutt won't be comfortable about paying for all of our pools. Upper Hutt has 1 council pool and 2 public libraries. We've got a lot more than that. So is it fair that Upper Hutt should be paying for those costs? Probably not. So there could be like a rate differential within it. That's the sort of stuff would be fleshed out through that detailed design phase over Christmas. Good luck to anyone that was thinking they were getting holidays. Sean, how is your talks going? How many people don't want amalgamation? I think most people are coming to my chats that I've had, not just this week, but previously, sort of saying, no, we don't want amalgamation, just say no. As I've outlined today, saying no is not an option. That's not the question we're being asked. The government is asking, government is saying you're going to get amalgamated. Do you want to do it yourself on your own terms quickly, fast-tracked? Or do you want to take more time? We'll do it to you. You'll have less say in the model. There might be some things that they say, look, you don't have a say anymore on the 2-tier system. We're deciding that for you, but you can decide these little bits here, or you don't get to decide now who you're amalgamating with. We're doing that. Here's the map. That decision's made for you. Like I say, there's just so much uncertainty about what the backstop process is. Makes it really hard to decide if we want head start or backstop when there is so much murkiness around what backstop is. How many councillors are leaning towards amalgamation? Don't know. We haven't really had a chat amongst ourselves, and I know everyone is still out coming along to drop-in sessions. We had 6 councillors at this afternoon's drop-in session, which was great. I've learnt that coffee drop-ins get some councillors there, but beer drop-ins at Brood Bulcott get more. So food for thought for future drop-in sessions. Yeah, genuinely don't know where this is going to land, not just for Hutt City, but across the whole region. Good question here from Sean. Will we get a say? Will there be a referendum on it after you're voted? There won't be one after we've voted on Wednesday about the Wednesday sort of Head Start proposal. Wellington, I believe, is looking at maybe they've talked about wanting to have a referendum. Andrew Little said that in his speech a few months ago, that he thinks if there is amalgamation happening, that the residents should ultimately have a say on it. Whether the government will entertain that idea if it gets into our Head Start proposal is another story. Whether the region would be happy to pay the $1.5 million cost to hold that referendum, another question. Ultimately, I think the community needs to have a say in this process. To date, they've had very little. This is a huge decision that impacts everyone. And I'm really clear that during that 6-month detailed phase, there has to be significant community engagement, if not a referendum, to make sure that the decision's actually being made by and alongside the people that it's actually going to impact. Dan, I said I wasn't going to put up anyone's views instead of questions. I'd be much more entertained by a Hutt Valley option. Yeah, so like I said, I would have liked us to have at least explored a Hutt Valley option to know whether it was going to go ahead or not. I'm I'm just kind of skimming out the questions because there's so many, just to try and find people that have put a question mark in it, because that helps me know that it's a question. All this one doesn't have a question, but it's a question: how can we be sure that we won't get overlooked and not get much money put into our communities? This is a very good question. This is the bit that's kind of, for me, really holding up the decision to make, and it would really come. I wish there was more certainty going into this. The Head Start proposal, there was more detail, because this is a question I would really like to know the answer for before making a decision on Head Start. But because of the complexities, this is the sort of thing that would get fleshed out through that detailed design phase over the next 6 months. Like I say, some councils might be able to charge their own rates to their own community to make sure that if their community wants a new swimming pool or wants to replace a library, they can do it, but they'll be paying for it. Or maybe some of the money comes down from the regional beast. I should really stop pulling out the regional beast. The big unitary council. The unitary just doesn't sound very good. Cool. I mean, I'll touch on this one very quickly because I just said I wasn't going to get into anything non-amalgamation, but I know everyone's been getting their rates bills over the weekend. Most are going to get them this week, but Te Ake-wise bills have gone off. The rates increase percentage is calculated after water has been removed. So as you know, your new council bill, if you don't already have it, will be here soon. You can go on the council's website now and click the property search and type in your address and see your rates bill. Now it is online. It's also in the Sabre online tool if you use that. You'll see your rates bill has dropped quite significantly, about 40%, 38, 40%, some closer to 50%, because all the water costs that council was previously charging have been removed from your council bills, and they are now being invoiced directly by the Te Ake-wai bill that you'll receive. Not a question on this one, but I will touch on the Auckland's Royal Commission process. They had sort of 3 or 4 years with some really smart, clever people that literally travelled the world, sort of listening and hearing what good governance models were. They came back and prepared a report, which isn't prepared a proposal, which isn't too dissimilar to what we have in front of us on Wednesday. Ultimately, the government looked at it, didn't like it, threw it in the bin, and 3 weeks later produced their own document for the Auckland Super City, and that's what they have now. It lost some of the really good things that the Royal Commission's report actually suggested, so a lot of that's actually being carried through into our own proposal. I'll bring this one up to read. Are you afraid of the voting parties becoming cliquish based on their own local agendas in small areas? I mean, this is genuinely one of the concerns of a big unitary beast. You'll find party politics become a lot more embedded in that unitary voting position, particularly the mayoral position, because these councillors and the mayor are now running across the entire Wellington region, which is a huge area to get around. It's a huge area to get out and door knock and flyers and all the stuff that goes with running a campaign. You're giving me PTSD now thinking back to last year's election. But that takes a lot of people, a lot of volunteers, a huge amount of money. And so you will find that unitary beast does get a lot more influenced by political parties and wealthy individuals or sort of celebrities almost that are well known across the region. So that was one of the worries, but I don't think you'll see that happening as much at that local level. But that's kind of the idea of having that split between the local community councils and the regional unitary beast. It sounds as a big upfront expense we're obviously all going to carry. I'm still not sure what the big problem is we're going to solve. Yep, this is a good question, and actually was the first question I asked at our very first workshop on this, before the government got involved and told us what to do. If we're looking at amalgamation, what's the problem we're actually trying to solve? And I think for most people, the problem they would like us to solve is rates affordability. How can you get rates down as much as possible? And if I'm honest, this proposal won't do that on its own in isolation. We need to be having a proper conversation about alternative funding methods of local government, because the projected levels of rate increase are just not sustainable. What would be the cost, process, and time frame for merging all the bylaws for all the entities that are merged? Good question. I don't think we've gone into the detail yet, but this is one of the places that you would genuinely see cost savings, rather than currently 8 or 9 bylaws for the exact same things with policy staff drafting the bylaws or the policies, and then communication staff going out to the community and consulting as we legally have to do, and then that coming to a council meeting with democratic services taking notes and minutes of the decision process. All of that would be streamlined into one process. There'd be one bylaw for the Wellington region. There'd be one policy on a particular topic. Whether they'd kind of merge all those on day one, or they'd look at the ones that were the oldest and go, well, these are up for renewal anyway, let's do them all together, is a different topic. Yeah, but that's genuinely where you would see some of the biggest efficiencies. Don't you think that the amount of uncertainty and unanswered questions means you shouldn't forge ahead? Yeah, this is one of the concerns with going ahead on Wednesday, is that it has been so quick, so rushed, and the process has been too tight to not consider some things that I'm still questioning. Like I say, the alternative though is if we decide not to forge ahead, is that the government will jump in and they will make a lot of the decisions for us, and we will have no control. We won't be holding the pen. The government will. And I don't think they'll put as much time and effort into the proposal that our region has put into. It'll probably be a blanket proposal for, well, it will be, they've said it will be a blanket proposal for the whole country. It won't be sort of bespoke legislation for each region now. It'll be one set of rules for the whole country, and there might be some places where we can influence some parts, but we do lose a lot of the control over what it could look like, which is literally the tension we are faced with. With the establishment cost of the 250 billion, no, so it's 250 million to 300 million is what's being projected in that report. It's an enormous cost to bear considering the cost of living right now. Yep, it would be covered by ratepayers or be debt funded. We shouldn't really be debt funding operational expenses, which this would be, but I guess there would be an argument that you could borrow this money and pay it back over a period of time. In our submission, when the government consulted on the first tranche of this last year, one of our submission points was, hey, if the government's going to make us do all this work, maybe the government could help fund some of this work. That point will still be made in this submission. If we do decide to go with the Head Start, in that submission, it has to absolutely say, if you want us to continue amalgamating at a cost of $250 million, you need to be helping with the funding, because our ratepayers are not bottomless pits of money. If saying no isn't an option, then how is Upper Hutt saying no? Do we have to go with Wellington City Council? So Upper Hutt hasn't said no yet. Their vote is on Wednesday afternoon at 4:30, same day as ours. Ours is at 9:30 in the morning. Welcome to join in the council chambers or watch online. Upper Hutt has indicated that they are unlikely to proceed with it, but like I say, their vote hasn't happened yet. But as I mentioned earlier, even if they say no, the rest of the region that does say yes can drag them into the proposal, because that's the way the government has structured it. Even if a council says no, if a majority of the region in that proposal says yes, it doesn't matter, which is fairly undemocratic, and I'm not loving that part of this process. Have we got huge debt from Riverlink? Can we unload that on other councils? No, don't think that would be happening. Regional council obviously has a lot to do with Riverlink as well. They fund a lot of that through our regional council rates that Hutt City residents pay. So yeah, there'll be no offloading of debt or cost onto other councils, because if we do it to them, they're going to do it to us as well. Great, I've got down to the bottom of my question list. So if you're still watching this thinking, oh, I'm just going to kind of listen in, I get more coming through. I'll wrap this up in sort of 3 or 4 minutes. So if you've got any more questions, now's your time to drop them in the comments below. Good question here. If the Labour government comes to power in November and they decide to scrap amalgamation, what then for Hutt City Council? Good question. Who knows? I wish Labour would come out with a bit more public certainty about what they will be doing about Head Start. If I'm honest, I think they're probably waiting for the 9th or 10th of August to see how every council lands their proposal, and then decide how they will react to either the uproar around the country or the love and support for Head Start proposals. They will probably, I would say, be sitting and waiting, because the government's made it clear what's happening so far. So yeah, that is one of the concerns, is that there is a general election right in the middle of all of this. Either the government could change, as you've suggested, or the makeup of the current consultation. What are they called? The current group of political parties that make up our government coalition. Our current coalition partners might change. The numbers might change as well, and what is a priority for one group might change as well through this. So there's quite a bit of uncertainty about that, with the national elections being later this year. Fellow councillor Andy Mitchell, who's been helping me today, well, not helping me, but he's been with me on the road today as we've been driving around and catching up with a whole bunch of drop-in sessions, has put a link there to the MCERT website, which is the replacement government entity replacing DIA. Government's going through its own reform. They've just merged a whole bunch of government departments, DIA being one of them, into MCERT. So if you go to their website, mcert.gov.nz, they have a whole page on this Head Start local government page, and there's a great Q&A on there as well. What is the least expensive option for amalgamation? Is there a more lightweight way to go about it that isn't full-scale change? Yeah, possibly. If we didn't actually amalgamate all the councils, but just said as things come up, we are going to work on them more regionally. One example that's going to happen, and actually happen before amalgamation is even decided fully, is the government, as you'll know, is replacing the Resource Management Act later this year. It's going to require regions to create one spatial plan to replace all the district plans that are currently in each district. So we're going to have to set up a spatial plan committee to probably have one rep or two reps from each council working on that. That's work that needs to be done anyway. That won't be replaced if we do amalgamate. So there could be opportunities to start amalgamating little bits of the council. Waste management is another one that I think should be dealt with a bit more regionally. It's crazy. We have one landfill here in the Hut. Potidoa has one and Wellington has one, but Potidoa has just decided they're closing theirs down in a few years' time. That's going to have real impacts for Silverstream landfill. Wellington's got some questions over its future of its landfill out there. Again, that would have a huge impact on Silverstream landfill, but we don't control what rubbish or recycling provisions are provided in those cities. We can't provide any incentives to divert waste, but it's our landfill that gets filled up, and it's us that need to fund any future expansion or new sites. And I can tell you one thing for certain: I do not want to be on any council in Wellington when it comes time trying to find a new landfill somewhere in Wellington. Thanks for taking the time to talk. Right, I want one more question. If you're watching this and you're thinking, I've got a question, is it a goodie? I don't know if it's a goodie. Throw in the questions now. I'll answer one last question, unless it's a real dumb question, and then I'm not going to answer it. But hopefully it's a good question, because there's only so long I can stall for before deciding if it's a good question or not. Yeah. Maybe we'll wrap up. If no one's got any more burning questions, I'm aware also there's like a 30-second lag. So even when I say, hey, write a question, you've 30 seconds later in the real world, you're going to hear this plea for one more question. So like I say, Wednesday, 9:30 a.m., our council is meeting to decide whether we want to be putting in a Head Start proposal or not. That is the decision in front of us. It is not, do we want amalgamation or not? Yes or no? That would probably be an easier question to ask. But the question is not that. The question is, you're being reformed. Do you want to do it yourselves or have it done to you? That meeting will be live streamed on our council's YouTube page. You can watch it there. No doubt there'll be media in the room as well, reporting on the outcome of what happens through that process. And also, as with all of our council meetings, you're more than welcome to come along and join us in council chambers as well. Thanks heaps for tuning in. I'm keen to do more of these. I might jump in later in the week to explain where the council landed, where I finally landed on my own viewpoints, because like I say, I still have no idea where I'm sitting or where this is going to go. So thanks heaps for tuning in. Catch you later. Cheers.